Good evening, televiewers. You're welcome to Prime Hour on My Media Prime. This evening we're going to be having a discussion, a conversation with Dr. Simon Munzu on the ongoing crisis rocking the Southwest and Northwest regions for over 7 years. Today we are going to, with him, discuss understanding why 7 years after it's been impossible to put a definite end to the ongoing crisis. We also are going to be looking at what stakeholders involved in the crisis are supposed to be doing at this moment to bring the tension to a halt, and also he's going to be telling us why he thinks federalism is the best way to put a definite end to the problems that we are facing as far as the socio-political tensions rocking the Southwest and Northwest regions are concerned. Dr. Simon Munzu, we should note, was the United Nations Secretary General's Deputy Special Representative for Ivory Coast from October 2014 to August 2016. But also to note that he held various capacities before this appointment by the United Nations Secretary General, and he has been a long-standing advocate for the autonomies of the two English-speaking regions, the Northwest and Southwest regions, but he wants that autonomy within a united Cameroon. He also is the chair of the steering committee of the Coalition of Cameroon Federalist Groups and Activists. Doctor, this is not our first time on Prime Hour. We are always glad to have you on Prime Hour to shed light on burning issues touching on our national life. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kum. It's always a pleasure to be with you, but also with your viewers on your program, Prime Hour on My Media Prime. Thanks for having me.
Doctor, I'll start by asking you, why has it been particularly difficult to stop the crisis since it started more than 6 years ago? Can you actually understand why things have not gone the way many have hoped for, especially the common man in the Southwest and Northwest region?
I think it's easy to understand. I mean, the difficulty you're describing, or the situation you're describing, can be explained by the lack of concern about Cameroonian citizens on the part of those who led our country into this war. Meaning, on the one hand, the government of Cameroon that could have approached the anglophone problem by simply convening a genuine dialogue and getting Cameroonians to talk about this problem with a view to solving it under the auspices of the government. Okay? Now, the government has never adopted that attitude, and so, of course, it means the government has never actually dedicated itself to finding a just and lasting solution to the anglophone problem. On the other hand, we have the separatists who have embarked on this adventure more than 6 years ago, and we warned them when it started that it was bound to end in war, because we didn't see how the rest of Cameroon, or for that matter, if you want to put it that way, Francophone Cameroon would say to us Anglophones, you guys just go. It wasn't going to happen. So independence was going to be either by war or not be at all. That was clear from the beginning. And so people should have been careful about making the choice to go to war. And we all know that it's easy to start a war, but not easy to end it. But what is more, we can start a war, but we cannot foretell the consequences of the war. Now we see what has happened in the past 6 years or so. So that's and therefore the separatists have to give up their illusion of a fight for so-called independence and accept that the solution to this problem can only be through negotiation, and they should come, honestly and in good faith to the negotiation table. Thirdly, I would also put the blame for what is happening on the Cameroonian population. Okay? Now, there is no country in the world where if citizens organize themselves, they cannot overcome if you like, the stubbornness of their regime, the regime governing them. So, if you observe, Mr. Kum, Cameroonians on the whole, with exception of a few, have been acting as if this problem concerns other people than Cameroonians. Where are the Cameroonian masses? It is Cameroonian population who have to say, enough is enough. We can't take this anymore. And they have to come out and demonstrate their condemnation. But so far, all we get is Cameroonians acting as if the solution to this problem is going to come from somewhere else, and refusing to engage in looking for a solution in spite of all the calls that have been made upon them to engage. Now, as long as those three components, the government, the separatists, and you and I, the Cameroonian, do not change our attitude, there will be no solution to this problem.
Doctor, you raised the passive nature of Cameroonians towards solving this problem. We know that so many persons are looking up to either the European Union, the United States of America, Britain, that is accused, and France of what is happening in Cameroon today. Many persons think that they are powerless to bring an end to what is happening, hoping that a third party comes in to push for an end to it.
My dear Mr. Kum, Cameroonians should not kid themselves. The solution to our Cameroonian problems is going to come from us Cameroonians. If we don't take the initiative of finding a solution, creating conditions where the international community can see what effort we are making and come to support that effort. If we think that it is the international community that is going to initiate the search for a solution to the anglophone problem, or for that matter, for the problem of governance in Cameroon at this time in general, forget it. It won't happen. The international community can come in support of the efforts that we ourselves make, whether it be in terms of convening the dialogue, whether it be in terms of conducting the negotiations, whether it be in terms of signing the agreement that will lead to the end to the crisis, whether it be in terms of implementing whatever agreement will have been signed. Those are not things on which the international community will take the lead. Cameroonians have to take the lead. And we, the ordinary Cameroonians, Anglophone and Francophone, ought by now to be exerting pressure on the government on the one hand and the separatists on the other, as I was saying earlier. You know, what interest has the international community got to come in as the initiators of peace in Cameroon? You just ask yourself that question, Mr. Kum. What interest have they got? Why would they be the main players in the field? We have clergymen, and I regret once again the passing of the late Christian Cardinal Tumi. We have clergymen of all denominations who represent a moral authority. We have traditional rulers of various degrees, including paramount chiefs here and there. Where are they? Why this is happening? We have women who say they organize women groups and all of that. What do they organize women's groups for? Where are women in Cameroon? The youth of Cameroon, who the government has organized into a so-called National Youth Council, which is just a mechanism for the government to continue to oppress those same youth, not allow them the possibility of expressing themselves as they should do. When are the youth of Cameroon who are enduring all of this going to say enough is enough and show their indignation? Cameroonians have to regain their sense of indignation. Otherwise, nothing will happen.
Doctor,
I am not calling for. I'm not calling for a revolution. Although even if it came to that, Mr. Kum, if that is the last thing that we have to do, then let's do it. I am a pacifist. I believe in dialogue. I believe in negotiation. But when a people who are suffering the way Cameroonians are suffering are deprived from holding meetings, deprived from meeting in a genuine dialogue, are deprived from seeking homegrown solutions to their problem, then if it requires that they rebel or that they revolt, then they have to rebel or revolt. Didn't we see what happened during the so-called Arab Spring in North Africa? Didn't we see what happened in Senegal before President Macky Sall came to power?
Yeah, but the
Senegalese hindered President Abdoulaye Wade from seeking a new term that they thought he didn't deserve. We can give you examples of that. I don't want to go to Sudan and all of that. So I conclude by saying that Cameroonians should not think that the solution to their problem is going to come from outside. The international community is prepared to help us, but we have to be at the helm of things ourselves, and then they will come in support of us.
Doctor, you had so many working years with the United Nations, and Cameroon has been in this situation for so long now. When it all started, we saw the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres come to Cameroon. We saw Patricia Scotland also come to Cameroon. We saw Moussa Faki and a host of others. The European Union actually showed some interest in what was happening in Cameroon, but today we hear very little from them, and the fact that they kept coming to Cameroon and calling on both parties to down their guns to put an end to the violations, human rights violations in these regions, gave people hope that after making these calls incessantly, something was going to happen either at the level of the UN Security Council. But today we hear very little from this world past. They are the ones who gave hope to some persons that some interventions could come from out of there, and as we speak, some persons still believe that the international community can spring a surprise to force the hands of both government and the separatists to find a lasting solution to the problem.
Leonard, perhaps precisely because I know something about the United Nations and the international community and the way they function, I do not share the standpoint or the expectations of those who are laying their hope on a solution to the anglophone crisis in general, in particular, but the governance conundrum in Cameroon in general being resolved by the international community. I have said it over and over again That is not the role of the international community, and the international community will not play that role. Number one, there are too many, there's conflict of interest within what you call the international community, Mr. Kum. If you go to the Security Council of the United Nations, which is in charge of ensuring peace and security in the world, on the Cameroonian situation, who is not aware of the fact that the 5 permanent members of the Security Council with the power of veto do not have a common agenda, do not have a common reading of the situation, do not have a common understanding of their respective interests vis-a-vis Cameroon and the regime in Yaoundé. And with any one of them having the capacity and the legal right under the UN Charter of vetoing what the other 4 may recommend, what do you think is going to happen? How are you going to expect the Security Council to be the place from where a solution of the anglophone problem or the Cameroonian situation will come? And when you talk of the Francophonie, the Commonwealth, African Union, and so on, the same analysis with respect to the United Nations applies to them as well, Mr. Kum. It applies to them. So we Cameroonians have got to give all these various players in the international community, in terms of individuals, but also in terms of organizations, global or regional or cultural or whatever, the reason to say that, okay, these Cameroonians are serious enough, they have committed to resolving this issue by peaceful means, we will put our good offices at their disposal to do that. That's when we can hope that they would intervene. They can facilitate, yes. They can they can broker, they can mediate, yes. But they are not going to come, for example, to Cameroon with I hear some people talking about, oh, there should be an interposition force, you know, between the government and the separatist forces. Forget about it. For anyone who knows under what condition and in what circumstances the international community and as per which process the international community takes a resolution through the UN Security Council, usually at the request of the host government. There are very few situations where the international community imposes its forces on a host government. Usually it is at the request of, or at least with the approval of, the host country, the host country's government, that the UN deploy troops, forces into the country in question. Even if it's a banana republic, the Security Council doesn't sit in New York and say, we are marching soldiers into this banana republic. It doesn't work that way. They have to go into signing, agreement with the host government and all of that. And it takes a great deal of effort. And don't forget, the international community does not have a standing army somewhere where you say, okay, there's a UN army here, this thing is happening in a part of the world, in a country that belongs to the UN, so deploy UN forces. No. But if ever the UN Security Council were to approve the sending of troops to Cameroon, the Security Council will instruct the Fed to contribute troops to send to Cameroon. So it's a very complex mechanism, and I have always felt when I hear Cameroonians speak as if the solution should come from the international community. The complexities of the community, of the functioning of the international community, are such that we cannot place our hope on that. So once again, I come back to this. It is Cameroonians themselves. First, our government ought to recognize that what has been going on in the...
He has done or not. In the beginning, we had so many resolutions coming out from the United States and other parts of the world concerning the war in Cameroon. But for the past 2 years, we hear very little from the international community. What would account for the indifference, the growing indifference by the international and African community towards what is happening in Cameroon? Is it the fact that the violence is going down? The firepower on both sides are slowing down?
Well, you mean the firepower on both the government forces and the separatist forces?
Yeah, because what would explain the fact that there is, for the past 2 years, the international community is not talking as much as they used to do concerning the crisis?
But Mr. Kum, the international community, again, I usually say that Cameroonians should not act as if the international community has to adapt its attitude and its behavior to Cameroon. It is Cameroon that has to take the international community as it is and adapt itself to the international community. You know, strange as some people, I mean, as that may sound to some people, that is the truth. The international community is not going to change its way of doing things, its way of organizing itself because of Cameroon. It's Cameroon that has to adapt to the reality of the nature of the beast called the international community. So, obviously, but when the crisis started, there was a sense of novelty about what was going on, and if you notice, practically all those interventions that you mentioned were simply calls upon people, calls addressed to Cameroonian stakeholders to get to the table. The international community came outright to support to deal with the humanitarian fallout of all the killing and the destruction, and which generated the phenomenon of internal displacement, refugees, flows to neighboring countries, particularly Nigeria, and all the rest of it. The children being deprived from school and so on. That would move the international community, the humanitarian consequences of the war. But you know, the international community came in to deal with these symptoms, these effects of the war, but not the root cause of the war. Because the root cause of the war, dealing with it, does not lie with the international community, it lies with Cameroonians themselves. And there are competing interests elsewhere for the international community's attention. So if they can, if on a daily basis, the Security Council agenda is crowded with conflicts big and small around the world. So there's an element of laying priorities in terms of the time of the Security Council in its meetings, in terms of the resources of the United Nations, including its humanitarian resources, its personnel, and so on. So when it comes to having to set priority as to where the UN should deploy its resources, you can be sure, Mr. Kum, that while you and I feel that the situation in Cameroon is very, very, very serious, on a scale, put on a scale with other situations that the international community is dealing with around the world, for the international community, that pales into insignificance. Now, that's a hard reality. It pales into insignificance. We say that we're estimating that so many thousand have been killed in this war. Okay, but there are other places where it is tens of thousands who have been killed and are being killed. the death of one person is deplorable, but the intervention of the international community takes into account its sense of priorities. So, again, just to conclude on that, let's face it, for the international community, the attitude today is, at the beginning, we called on those Cameroonians to lay down their arms, to engage a dialogue, and we were prepared to accompany them, facilitate, negotiate, and so on. They didn't follow us. See what happened with the Swiss initiative.
Yes, I was going to ask. I was coming there.
Who shot?
Doctor, I was coming there. I wanted to ask you how closely you follow the Swiss initiative and what has happened in Canada. Lots of hope given to so many persons that, okay, the Swiss-led initiative was going to work out a panacea to the crisis, and then hope also was raised at the level of Canada. How closely did you follow it, and how and why did these two not work out?
Well, for the same reason. The same reason, namely the unwillingness of the two belligerent parties in Cameroon, the government on the one hand and the separatists on the other, to take action which ends the war and the suffering of Cameroonians in this war. That's all. Because if you notice, the Swiss initiative, initially, the government gave the impression that it was in favor of the initiative, at least some parts of the government. But not long after that, it became clear that there were other parts, other actors in the government that were against the Swiss initiative. And at the end of the day, the components of the government that were against the initiative seem to have won, because we know that the Swiss initiative ground to a halt, practically. Okay? And in parallel, because incidentally it's amazing the extent to which the government and the separatists recover in these matters. Because in parallel, we also found amongst the separatists groups that were in favor of the Swiss initiative and other groups that were hostile to the Swiss initiative. And what was the end? At the end of the day, the Swiss were the negotiators were unable to bring all the separatist groups together, into this process. And so the thing fizzled out. Now, in the light of that, we have reason to despair that the international community was turning its back on us, even in terms of supporting negotiation and dialogue. But our hopes were kindled once again when we learned about the Canadian initiative, the Canadian peace process. And we said, wow, at last things may happen. We have learned our lessons from the Swiss initiative. But Mr. Kum, you can testify, you witness as I do, that unfortunately the Canadian peace process is about to suffer the same calamity as the Swiss process did. Why? Because of the same attitude on the part of the same actors who don't care anything about the suffering of the Cameroonian people, especially in the north and southwest. Otherwise, how can we explain that the Canadians would hold meetings with government representatives on the one hand, separatist representatives for a number of meetings over a period of 4 months, as we subsequently learned, and that at the end of that process, which they held in consultations were in secret, when they got to the point where they thought that they could now come out and inform the rest of us that things are happening, all of a sudden the Cameroon government says that it never mandated anyone to mediate. Was the Canadian Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Canadian government lying on a matter like this? And at the same time, again, as they continue to resemble each other, the government and the separatists. At the same time, even on the separatist side, there were groups which once again said they were not in favor of the Canadian process. And interestingly enough, Mr. Kum, when you analyze the situation, it is the group that was in favor of the Swiss initiative that today says it is not in favor of the Canadian initiative. It is a group that was not in favor of the group that was in favor of the Swiss initiative that are today in favor of the Canadian initiative. How can we this confusion? By people who claim tomorrow to have their own country and run it. Why are the separatist so-called leaders behaving like this? Why?
Okay,
they can't get their own act together in response to initiatives like this. You know, so as long as we, the Cameroonian players, keep fooling around like that, you cannot be surprised that the international community is simply disgusted with the situation, and it's like saying, okay, if you guys continue to do it that way, take care of yourselves.
Okay, take care of yourself. But back here in Cameroon, we saw women who marched after children were killed in Kumba, and we had so many civil society organizations that spoke out, actually calling for an end to what is happening in Cameroon. We hear very little even from them. Traditional rulers themselves have been silent, and across all spheres of our national life, people are talking the less about it and hoping for a miracle to happen. How do we explain it? Is it the fact that they are also growing tired of what they have been talking about over the years?
Yeah, you know, Mr. Kum, the first observation is that under the long Ahidjo regime that lasted more than 20 years, and the very long Biya regime that has lasted 40 years and continuing to count, the Cameroonians have experienced what, without exaggeration, can be characterized as autocratic rule, where they haven't been allowed the freedom to assemble, the freedom to speak. And when we say freedom to speak, we're not talking about going on my media prime. Forgive for taking that example, but I take it because I am a friend of your channel. But so I take my media prime, but it could be any other of the tens of television channels we have in Cameroon. It's not a matter of going on those channels and sitting in panel discussions, talking where everybody goes home and nothing happens. Cameroonians have been deprived of their constitutional right to meet, to assemble, to debate, to discuss, if necessary, to march, to demonstrate. And these are all rights which are inscribed in the Constitution of Cameroon, but which governmental action permanently and continuously deprives Cameroonians of exercising these constitutional rights. So if they cannot meet, they cannot discuss, they cannot strategize, how do you expect them as en masse to bring a solution? So the feeble voices of a few determined activists among women, youth, some men, would call, as you were saying, would manifest their discontent, but that's a drop in the ocean, and the government knows it. The government knows that this is what will happen, that, oh, don't worry, they will make those noises. Those will go to Bongo Square in Boya there and sit in their black and all of that, but that will be the end. Nothing will happen. You remember when they marched to the governor's office in Boya, following the Kumba incident that you're referring to? You remember what Governor Okala Bilai said to the women who went to quote unquote present their petition to him? But all of that, the government knows that this is something that will pass in a few minutes, 2-3 days. Give them time; the wind will blow, and we'll carry on our business as usual. So, in the light of all of that, Cameroonians really have to look deep into themselves and say, how can we allow this to continue? Attitudes have to change. Okay? Because otherwise, the few people who are determined and who have been forthright and so on, they too get discouraged. They get discouraged.
No.
I commend, for example, the action of a movement like Stand Up for Cameroon, where where one of the prominent people, the leaders, is my dear sister, Madame. You know, but as an act of protest, this is a consistent organization that has been out there practically every Friday and so on. But see how few they are. What impact can they have when there is no, when the masses of women do not take their example and say, yes, Mama, that thing what I do, I'm so, no live for una, we too must join inside. You know, it becomes a Kawara affair. It becomes Madame affair and so on. No, it cannot be like that. So if Cameroonians don't want to take the risk that needs to be taken in order to straighten up their country, it will continue to go downhill as it is doing now. Yeah.
Okay, Doctor, are we not also where we are, lingering on because the truth is not told by those who ought to do so? We have historians who would not actually fix the misinformation given to so many persons at different levels about our history. For example, it was on this platform that you made it known to the world that the flag that was brandished on the Mungo Bridge was actually bought in a shop and not given by the United Nations. An information that was also confirmed by Barrister Elat when I had an interview with him. He actually told me that the flag was somewhere in his house, and he actually corroborated almost everything that you said, and a host of other historical facts that may not be too right. Actors who may have deceived the people on either side are not coming out to say we made an error on this and that. For example, take Resolution 1608, UN Resolution 1608, the way it is interpreted by so many persons and a host of other things. Is it not also why people still believe that the path on which they are is the right one?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Misinformation and disinformation, deliberate, have been the bane of Cameroonians. They have contributed to landing us where we are. Because, for a start, everybody knows as a matter of common sense, even your child will know that you do not resolve a problem by denying it. If you have a problem and you are going to you want to resolve it, the first thing you do is admit that the problem exists, and then go on to see how you can resolve it. Just denying the existence of the problem when in fact it exists is not a solution. And unfortunately, much of what passes for public opinion is indeed a denial of our history, a distortion of the facts of our history, a tone of misinformation about the facts of our history, cultivated intentionally, deliberately by those who want to mislead. So, on security, General Assembly, UN General Assembly Resolution 1608, I have spoken over and over and over again about that, including on your platform, as you just reminded us. That is the biggest hoax I have ever come to observe in terms of the lies, that the misinformation, the disinformation surrounding Resolution 1608. Resolution 1608 simply, and it's a very short resolution, just about 5 or 6 operative paragraphs when you forget about when you leave the preambular paragraphs. The substantive paragraphs, the operative paragraphs are just like about 5 or 6, very short resolution, and it's very clear where the UN General Assembly, after taking cognizance of the results of the plebiscite conducted in British Southern Cameroon on the 11th of February 1961, congratulated the UN staff who conducted that plebiscite, noted that Southern Cameroonians had voted freely and with full knowledge of what the consequences of their decision would be, and then went on in paragraph 5 to call upon the parties, being the government of Southern Cameroon, the government of Republic of Cameroon, and the United Kingdom as the administering authority of the Southern Cameroons, to pursue the negotiations, continue the negotiations which they already had prior to the plebiscite as to the fate of what would be the fate of Southern Cameroons if, on the one option, it decided to join Nigeria. What would it become? What would be the consequence of that decision? Or if it chose to join the Republic of Cameroon, what would be the consequence of that decision? The parties before the plebiscite had been discussing, negotiating, talking about that. So the UN General Assembly asked them to pursue those discussions so that latest on the 1st of October, they come to an agreement as to how to implement the decision made by the people of British Southern Cameroon to join Republic of Cameroon. And the parties had indicated that it was going to be by way of forming a federation, a federal republic. So the UN said, you guys go, since the evidence before us here is that you have not yet concluded the practical arrangements for giving effect to this decision that was made by Southern Cameroonians 2 months ago, because remember that we are on the 21st of April 1961, so that's about 2 months and a few days after the plebiscite of 11 February 1961. So you guys go, since you've told us that you have not yet concluded, you go and pursue your negotiations, conclude. But make sure that whatever you do, latest 1st of October 1961, you finalize everything, because on that day of 1st of October 1961, the trusteeship agreement between the United Nations and the United Kingdom for the administration of the trust territory of British Southern Cameroons will end, or British Cameroons will end. All of that is there. There is nothing about, as I hear separatist propagandists when they want to lie, they tell you that there was an interim period, there was a trial period, there was supposed to be a so-called union treaty. There was no union treaty. It was not deposited at the United Nations. Therefore, this thing was a sham, blah, 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 blah. No. The decolonization of the Southern Cameroons was not the result of negotiations between one sovereign country called the Southern Cameroons and another sovereign country called Republic of Cameroon, where they concluded a treaty. No. It was part of the process of decolonization. In other words, it is the UN that, in implementing its process of decolonization, laid down step by step what was to be done. And those steps were followed. And the culmination of those steps was the adoption of what became known as the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Cameroon.
Doctor,
under whose terms the Federal Republic of Cameroon functioned from the 1st of October 1961 to July of 1972. All of a sudden, you have people who come today and tell you that, oh, there was no union treaty, therefore there was no union.
But doctor, are we not?
And there are people who believe that.
Are we not still in this because of some of the resolutions of AAC1 and AAC2, where it sounded more like an ultimatum that was given that if this is not done, this is the step we are taking, also amplified by your move to the United Nations. And some persons actually still think that France has an unfinished business in Cameroon, as well as Britain. Remember that a petition was sent to the House of Commons in Britain, and we read the reply that stated that Britain was done with its job of administering a part of Cameroon under their mandates as given by the United Nations. But are we not also in all of this because of what the hope that AAC gave, that there was a possibility for us to do this, because of the hope that was given through the visit to the United Nations to come in and do this or that, and they believe that Britain still has an unfinished business and that the United Nations still has an unfinished business? Because I don't know whether Cameroonians actually believe that they are the ones to negotiate whatever they are into it now.
No, I mean, the Cameroonians have no, the United Nations, its business in Cameroon in terms of decolonizing Cameroon under British administration and Cameroon under French administration. The work of the United Nations with respect to those two territories was completed latest 1st of October 1961, because remember that the French part of the territory ends on the 1st of January 1960. So for that part, the UN process of decolonization ended on the 1st of January 1960. And for the English-speaking part, it ended on the 1st of October 1961, period. So let no one fool you that that's a process that can be reopened. You know, it would not. In fact, the entire trusteeship system of the United Nations has virtually disappeared because there are no trust territories anymore. You know, so and therefore, again, it's an illusion for anyone to be pushing the propaganda that the UN can come and reopen those issues. It will not. However, and this is where I come to what you are saying concerning the SCNC, the aftermath of the AAC and all of that. You know, because our real case is that, when I say our, I mean us Anglophones in Cameroon. Our real case is that we did not join La République du Cameroun on the 1st of October 1961 to form a new country called the Federal Republic of Cameroon. We did not do that blindly. we did it on the basis of assurances that were given formally by the Republic of Cameroon, witnessed and endorsed by the United Nations, that when British Southern Cameroons achieves independence on the 1st of October 1961, by joining the Republic of Cameroon, the two will form a federal union. That was a clear understanding arrived at by all parties concerned, witnessed by the United Nations before the 1st of October 1961. So we, Anglophones in Cameroon, are entitled to say that anyone, any regime in Cameroon has to respect that fundamental agreement, that fundamental arrangement, which was a condition for our joining La République. Because if we had been told that as you are going into union with La République, be prepared to be swallowed up, La République will just swallow you up, will marginalize you, will dominate you, will try to dismantle your own heritage, your own way of system of education, your own system of justice, your own way of administering public affairs. If that had been the campaign message which preceded the conducting of the plebiscite of 11th February 1961, you can be sure, Mr. Kum, that the outcome would have been different. It looks like we're having power problems here, Mr. Kum. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, we're going to take a short break, hoping that what doctor has to fix gets fixed. Just monitor once he's back. We continue. Okay, we are with Dr. Simon Munzu.
What Cameroonians would typically say is that there can be power failure even in that place where Simon Munzu is. That power failure is not only in Boya and Douala and Yaoundé and Bafoussam and Garoua and Marwa. It is also in that place where Simon is. Okay, but anyway, see how quickly it was fixed. Yes, that's the difference.
Yes, but
anyway,
but so doctor,
sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Yeah, tell us about the hope that was given by the outcomes of AAC 1 and 2. There was a position that was taken that sounded more as like an ultimatum that gave hope that if government failed to do this or that, and many persons.
Well, exactly. Mm-hmm. No, exactly. That's the point I was trying to develop before we had this brief interruption. Namely that with that as a background, when we convened the All Anglophone Conference in Boya on the 2nd and 3rd of April 1993, it was with a view to Anglophones in that conference coming out with a common stand that they were going to engage the regime, the government in Yaoundé with a call to address the Anglophone problem. And that the only sensible way to address the Anglophone problem is to return to the original promise, to the original arrangement, which was federation. And that is why the key message coming out of the deliberations at the All Anglophone Conference in Boya consigned in the document that we called the Boyer Declaration was a return to the federal system of government. Okay? And so we sent many petitions, letters, resolutions, and all of that to the government in Yaoundé. Now, an honest and sensible government would have admitted that we Anglophones were right in doing what we're doing, in calling for what we're calling, and met us in a conference to find out what exactly is the nature of this problem and how to resolve it. If we did that back in 1993, 1994, 1995, all of what we're experiencing today would not have happened. That has no concern for civil liberties and for public opinion had the attitude then that it has today. And so in our effort to internationalize the situation, call the attention of the international community to this situation, especially since we argued then, as we argue now, that the international community was the midwife of the Federation, you know, we felt we needed to go to the international community. And so, I mean, we dispatched a delegation to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting that held around that time in 1993 or 1994 in Australia, you know, and we felt we should follow that up with sending a delegation to the United Nations. That's why the delegation that was led, at least morally, by our elder statesmen, the late Pafoncha and the late Pamuna. That's how it came about that we went to the United Nations. But we went to the United Nations indeed to draw attention to the fact that this union, which they midwifed, has gone sour, and that there's a breach of promise on the part of the Yaoundé regimes, successive regimes, Ahidjo and Biya, and we wanted the international community to take cognizance of that and do something about it, you know. Now, so, but when we went to, and this is where what you said earlier about lies and lies and lies, you know, affecting the way we do things and the way we look at things. When we went to New York, yes, we were received in audience by one of the assistant secretaries general on behalf of the secretary general, you know, for about 30 minutes, came to the audience for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, you know, during which we made the case for a return to federation, as opposed to Anglophone Cameroon continuing to be dominated, marginalized, assimilated, subjugated, and so on. But as you would expect, the gentleman listened to us, we made our presentation, and he said the kind of thing that you would expect to hear a diplomat tell you in those circumstances. Okay, I have listened, I will report to the Secretary General, and we'll see what happens afterwards. And that was the end of the audience and the main part of the mission. However, after we left that, in preparation to coming back home, Dr. Arnold Yombang, of blessed memory, went to the UN shop and bought 2 UN flags, which are in the UN gift shop. Anybody who goes to the gift shop can buy. He bought them for himself. For himself. But when we got to Cameroon, in the midst of welcome at the Mongo Bridge and all of that, now the independentists, those who were in favor of independence, because even at that time they already existed, the Cameroon Anglophone movement and some even more extreme like Cameroon Anglophone movement, were already talking about independence. So that fringe of our quote-unquote movement unfolded this flag and waved it, claiming that the UN had given it to us as a sign, a symbol for us to come and reassure the Cameroonian people that the UN is coming. They're coming to restore our independence. Mr. Kum, I was so distraught about that, you know, and because it did not represent the truth, and it raised expectations amongst our people which were completely unjustified, which did not correspond with the facts. And during the tour that we undertook in what is called today, or even then, the Northwest and Southwest regions, you know, whenever in our delegation that flag was hoisted, and I missed the message that this is a flag that was given us by the UN, blah, 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 there were those of us, I can cite Barrister Ellard, of course myself, who said, no, we don't need to go this far. We don't need to be lying to our people. That is not what the UN said. But we were overridden by the hawks, the Cameroon anglophone movement fringe of the thing, you know. So this is only one example.
Yeah, but,
one example.
Yeah, but
today, of course, you will find...
Dr.
Yes,
Munzu, Dr. Munzu, many persons are actually standing on the resolutions that you are said to have read out there in Bamenda after the AAC2, where you said that if government were not, if government were to fail to do one or two, this is going to. Don't you also think that that is responsible for where we are today? And how do we relate what we are living today to the outcome of AAC2?
Yeah, I mean, you're to a certain degree, you are right to see a correlation between the outcome of the AAC2 in Bamenda and what is happening today, in the sense that number one, don't forget that there were two main factions within the AAC 1 and 2, and subsequently within the Southern Cameroon's National Council, once the Anglophone National Council that was established in Buea was renamed. It wasn't transformed, but it was renamed the Southern Cameroon's National Council, because we didn't want to continue to use Anglophone. Anyway, so there were always, and it was never denied, there were always those two currents within the movement. The difference between then and today is that we believed, all of us believed in the force of argument, you know, and not the argument of force. So we held our debates within the movement. Those who were in favor of independence made their case. Those who were in favor of federation made their case. And at the end of the day, we said, okay, we will compromise. We will establish a compromise between the two, because we didn't see one winning over the other. So we decided we would establish a compromise between the two. And what was the substance of the compromise? The first part, and so if you go and read that Bamenda proclamation, which I, as spokesperson of the SCNC at the time, read on the floor of the conference, the first part of it says that we give the government in Yaoundé a reasonable time to address the grievances that we had catalogued both in Buea and now in Bamenda. Okay? And now the interesting thing there is that we used the term reasonable time, you know, advisedly, deliberately, because we didn't want to tie ourselves by saying we give the government 3 months or 6 months or 1 year. If we did that and then the 3 months, 6 months, 1 year passed and nothing happened, then what? So we said we gave the government a reasonable time. But that was to humor the federalists, those who were in favor of us continuing to be part of Cameroon, but also saying that we have to be part of a federal Cameroon, and that therefore our thrust should be to fight for a return to federation. Okay? But to humor the more those who were in favor of independence, because there were some who said, let's proclaim independence right there in Bamenda, there and then. So to those ones, we said, okay, if at the end of the reasonable time, whatever that finally was going to be, if at the end of the reasonable time, the government does not respond to our grievances, then the Southern Cameroon's National Council should, without calling another all-Anglophone conference, constitute itself into a constituent assembly of Anglophones, adopt a new constitution for the Anglophone Cameroon, proclaim the re-establishment of the independence of the Southern Cameroons, and use all means possible to defend it. The wording is there, and the wording is clear. You know, I won't deny that. You know, but again, each of us in that meeting, federalists or independentists, knew where we stood, knew which part of that resolution which I read. I read it because I had to read all of the resolution. I wouldn't have gone there as spokesperson and say, I'm reading this part to deal with that Hubert federalist because I'm a federalist, and I'm leaving the other part to someone, an independentist, to come and read. No, I read the entire thing. And I hear today separatists telling me, reminding me how, you know, the one who stood up and blah, 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 blah. But that's a history behind this. And so, fast forward to today, yeah, if today people are claiming that what they're doing is related to the proclamation, the Bamenda Proclamation, then I would want to ask them this. When SCNC, the Southern Cameroon's National Council, which was the governing organ of the movement that we started in Buea, is it the Southern Cameroon's National Council that is fighting the war with Mr. Biya today, or with the Biya regime today? Did the Southern Cameroon's National Council meet as mandated under that resolution and transform itself into a constituent assembly? Is it a constituent assembly that decided that the time has come for us Anglophones to go to war over the Anglophone problem? No. So a number of adventurers who had been preparing for this kind of opportunity in their youth, because Ebenezer Akwanga and Lucas Choayaba did not start their the separatist thing in 2016, 2017, 2018, as they pretend today. No. They had been laying the ground for that way back to when they were young people in the Southern Cameroon's Youth League. You know, so they took advantage of a vacuum that the government created in the Anglophone movement by arresting and locking up Agbobala and Fontaine-Nuba, amongst others. The government created a vacuum, and when Agbobala and Fontaine-Nuba decided from prison that the movement that they were leading will henceforth be led from abroad by Ivo Tapang and Mark Barretta, who were nothing but, you know, social media activists. That's where the whole thing derailed. The whole thing derailed because who was Tapang to lead anything? Who was Mark Barretta to lead anything except by war on social media? Okay. So Cho Ayaba and Akwanga saw an opportunity in this, and they moved into that void. And the rest is where we are today. So there is remotely a correlation between the Bamenda Proclamation and what we have now. But when you analyze it properly, those who are saying that, or those who have led us into this situation, supposedly in response to what Yaoundé, they say, did, cannot claim that they are drawing their legitimacy or their authority from the Bamenda Proclamation, because what they did is not what the Bamenda Proclamation prescribed.
Okay, I want you to clarify on this. Greetings, Mr. Liu. I'm really enjoying your program, but I wish to ask Dr. Simon Munzu that if 11th of February 1961 was actually the Independence Day of British Southern Cameroon, why did the UN General Assembly vote again on the 21st of April 1961 for the same independence? Please help me understand. Thanks. Julius is writing from Boya.
Okay, my dear Julius, no, let's be clear. 11th February 1961 was not the day of independence. Okay? 11th February 1961 is the day on which the people of Southern Cameroon, in their overwhelming majority, decided that they would achieve independence by joining Republic of Cameroon. Okay? So there are two things that happened. The first thing is, 11th of February, the overwhelming majority of Southern Cameroonians of voting age decide that their territory, Southern Cameroons, will achieve independence by joining the Republic. Then come 21st of April 1961, because you mentioned that in your question, the UN General Assembly sitting in New York examines what happened on 11th of February 1961 and endorses it, says we approve this result, we respect the will of the people of Southern Cameroon. They have decided that they are going to get independence by joining the Republic of Cameroon. So again, on the 21st of April, there was no independence. But on that 21st of April, the UN then said to all the parties concerned, now that the people of Southern Cameroon have decided on the 11th of February that they are going to get independence by joining La République, you guys go and continue your discussions and negotiations as to the terms of that joining. But make sure that you conclude them by the 1st of October 1961, because on that day, British Southern Cameroon will become independent by joining Republic of Cameroon, and on that same day, the trusteeship agreement between the United Nations and the United Kingdom for the administration of Southern Cameroon will end. So, my dear Julius, Independence Day for British Southern Cameroon was not 11th February, it was not 21st of April 1961, it was 1st of October 1961.
Okay, now, let's look at what happened in you said that the terms upon which this union was supposed to work had to do with a structure that is federal in nature. That's what you said?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, but now, who do you blame when we know that politicians from, I don't know, West Cameroon at the time in 1966 agreed to dissolve their parties into one grand party? Was that not a signal that we were moving away from referendum took place? We saw politicians from West Cameroon who descended and did campaigns for the people to vote.
You're right, Mr. Kum. But again, that is one aspect of this distortion and misinformation and disinformation over our history.
Okay.
Because there are people who present the situation today as if everything that has happened and that has gone wrong is the doing of President Amadou Ahidjo. It's very convenient to try to portray it like that, but in reality, that's not what it is. That's not what it was. Our own people, our own leaders have to assume the blame, and we have to be prepared to admit that they behaved less than intelligently, courageously, astutely, in the situation. Because number one, it even begins, Mr. Kum, with preparation for the Fumban conference. The likes of Professor Julius Ngo would confirm, and not only him, other historians, Professor Anthony Ndi and so on, in terms of Cameroonian historians, especially of English-speaking expression, that prior to the meeting in Fumban from the 17th to the 21st of July, 1961, the draft constitution that Republic of Cameroon and the Foncha government in Buea had agreed upon, and which was now going to be examined in Fumban, that draft was handed to Prime Minister John Gu Foncha, leader of the KNDP. And when the Southern Cameroon delegation met in Bamenda to prepare to go to the meeting in Fumban, it is on record that Prime Minister Foncha did not put that document before the conference for examination, even though it was demanded, specifically demanded by members of at that conference for him to do so. So the first thing that happened, or the first consequence, was that our delegation went to Fumban without adequate knowledge of what was in the draft constitution, that the document that they were going to discuss and finalize in Fumban. Many in our delegation, and this is on record by testimony given by many of them, those of them who went there, they were seeing the document for the first time. And they asked Mr. Ahijo, how can we in 2 or 3 days examine a thing like this? And Ahijo said, okay, if you guys say you haven't seen it, then we will leave you to look at it, and then we will convene. So they left the Southern Cameroon delegation on its own to look at the document, whereas in fact, from day one, from the first session of day one, it was supposed to be a joint session to examine the document. Now, so whose fault was that? That our delegation should have gone to Fumban so inadequately prepared. Number one. Number two, when it came to the forming of the creation of the Cameroon National Union, the CNU, on the 1st of September 1966. Now, just see the process that led to that. For President Ahijo, very hot on federation. He accepted federation only as temporary measure, because for him, his ultimate was to rule Cameroon as le père de la nation, the coexistence of government, the government of West Cameroon, the government of East Cameroon, which was a former Republic of Cameroon, and then the federal government, he saw that as, dividing power the way he didn't want. And so from the very beginning, his intention was to move towards a unitary system of government. But he did it step by step. And at each of the steps, with the connivance of anglophone politicians. So when it comes to the step concerning the creation of the Cameroon National Union, what Ahijo said to the leaders of other political parties was that the time has come for all of us to work as one family, and that is impeded, or that will be impeded if we continue to work as members of different political parties. So let's form one political party. His propaganda was to say that we're not forming a party unique. We're going to form a parti unifié. So it's not a single party that we're trying to create. We're trying to create a unified party, by which he meant that, listen, this party is going to be a conglomerate of my party, the Union Camerounaise, Mr. Foncha's party, the Cameroon National Democratic Party, Mr. Ndeli, Dr. Ndeli's, and Mr. Mbile's party, the Cameroon National People's Congress, the CPNC, Mr. Ntumba's house, One Cameroon, etc. So what we are trying to do is not create a single party, we are trying to have a unified party. Although, of course, the outcome was going to be a single party. You know, now, at that point, in Francophone Cameroon, virtually all the opposition parties had been killed, because Ahidjo just didn't allow pluralism in Francophone Cameroon. So they were virtually non-existent. All the parties that have been created by the support prisons and others, Charles Asale and so on, have been virtually killed. On the contrary, in West Cameroon, pluralism in terms of political parties was vibrant. That's why in that small population, you had the KNDP as a ruling party, but you had a very vibrant opposition, you know, through the CPNC, but you also had the One Cameroon, and so on. So, and therefore, Ahidjo's idea of having a so-called unified party was targeted more towards the Anglophones, because they were the ones who had a plurality of political parties. So at that point, Mr. Kum, our people, our politicians should have been astute enough to know that if they follow Mr. Ahidjo into creating a single party, given that it is the policy of that party that would henceforth be applied in governing the entire country, they should have rejected Mr. Ahidjo's overtures for the creation of a so-called unified party. And they did not. And the reason why they did not was because, you know, there are chapters of this story that would need to be emphasized. The reason why they did not is that there was so much division amongst themselves in the West Cameroon government and in the West Cameroon House of Assembly. So much division, and Ahidjo just capitalized on those divisions. You know, and therefore there were some of them who were very keen to join Ahidjo in order to escape what they saw as the oppression of the KNDP in West Cameroon. You know, so they agreed with the scheme. And so on the 1st of September 1966, the Cameroon National Union was created with Foncha and his KNDP voluntarily agreeing to dissolve. Dr. Ndeli and Mr. Mbile and their CPNC deliberately agreeing to dissolve. The One Cameroon of the Ntumbaza deliberately agreeing to dissolve. I don't remember whether there were some other political parties, but those were the main three. But once they did that, and Ahidjo promised Foncha was going to be the vice president of the new party. Here, Ahidjo will be president, Foncha will be the vice president. The executive of the party will be taken from all these parties that were coming into the union, and that happened. It happened. There were positions distributed like that within the central committee of the party that they called the Cameroon National Union, very close to Ahidjo's Union Camerounaise. You know, once they did that, they had to assume offices in that new party. They were all very boastful that Cameroon now has only one party, we are one nation, one people, and all of that. But they should have seen the implications that this would have with respect to the autonomy of West Cameroon, as it was called then, the federated state of West Cameroon. You know, and what was to be expected happened. Namely, that once Ahidjo had become the president of the only party in Cameroon in 1966, what vehicle did West Cameroonians have any more for playing politics in West Cameroon? There was no political party in West Cameroon anymore. And Ahidjo used that for 6 years, from 1966 to 1972, when he was national chairman of the one and only political party, to do the things that he did. Because there was no power, political power base in West Cameroon anymore. You know, so, but again, that was step two. Step three, Ahidjo, having laid the ground for 6 years, during which he dominated the scene with no competition from Foncha or Endeli or anybody, because they were subsumed within his political party. He now said, okay, the moment has come for me to move on one step further, and that one step further is to say that, well, the federation has been costing us too much. We are all the children of, we're all Cameroonians. There's no anglophone, no francophone. We need to consolidate our national unity and all the rest of it. So the time has come for us to abandon the federal system in order to embrace a unitary system. And therefore, I have decided, j'ai décidé, that, and that was, he said that addressing the National Assembly, the Federal National Assembly, on the 6th of May, 1972, that I have decided that I will consult the Cameroonian people with my proposal that the time has come for us to move away from the federal system and embrace the unitary system. Okay. And for that purpose, I am going to call a referendum on the 20th of May. 2 weeks later, 14 days. 2 weeks later.
Yes, but
so again, in all of that, there was no the West Cameroonian leadership, did not stand up. I mean, it is reported by historians that timidly, after they left the assembly, after Ahidjo president, timidly they were assembled in the late Professor Bernard Forlong's home in Yaoundé to discuss what they had just heard Ahidjo say, and the outcome was that they decided, okay, they should not open any hostilities with Ahidjo, blah, blah, blah. So they did not do anything. But even at that point, if they had said that no way, Mr. Ahidjo, we came into this union on the express understanding with you participating, in fact, with you leading the discussions, that we're going to form a federal union in which our own heritage will be preserved. What you are saying there, we don't like it because it's going to end in, it's like to end in us being absorbed and all of that. They could have created a crisis, and it is possible that Ahidjo would have beaten his retreat, but they did not. So, who want to ascribe some of the blame for what we're going on today, for their failure to stand up? So, Mr. Kum, I recount all these examples among several others to say that contrary to what some people who want to varnish, the lies and make them look like truth, always gloss over the extent to which our own leaders were responsible for us getting to where we got into, and always try to make it look like it was all the fault of Ahidjo. Okay. And today, I will say what I find frustrating. What I find frustrating is that we Anglophones have not learned any lesson from that. The way we are behaving in the face of the present crisis shows clearly that we didn't learn any lessons from the way our forebears handled these situations. Otherwise, why are we so divided in the face of what is a common challenge? For the survival of our culture, our heritage within Cameroon. Why are we so divided? Why are they saying that some are unitary state people, some are federalists, some are separatists, and all of that? And if initially we are, which is quite natural. What is stopping us from getting together to say, let's examine the various positions? Can we arrive at compromises? Is there one that is that can be chosen above the other because it is preeminently more beneficial to us? We have to engage a dialogue, organize, examine the situation, arrive at a common solution, decision was what to do. And that, Mr. Kum, was the main thrust of the Anglophone General Conference initiative. But see what happened. That initiative was shut down, blown apart, partly by us, the Anglophones.
Okay, Doctor, we do not have enough time to discuss lots of things that I had in stock, but let's go straight to, we are skipping because I wanted us to look at what the stakeholders are supposed to do. But let's move on to your call and belief in federalism. When you say you believe that the sure way of solving this problem is through federalism, I would like to ask you, how do we get to implementing federalism as a form of state in Cameroon without taking power?
Without taking power?
Yes. Is it going to be decreed?
No, I mean, it's going to be negotiated.
Okay.
All of this has to have as a backdrop the acceptance of Cameroonians, starting from those who are in power today in Yaoundé, but especially the rest of us Cameroonians, accepting that for Cameroon to get out of the present situation, we have to return to the federal system of government. Because what are the two main errors that we should be trying to address? One, from the perspective of the Anglophone problem, we should be trying to find a solution that will put an end to the sense amongst Anglophones, and not just the sense, the reality amongst Anglophones, that they are marginalized, that they are dominated, that they are subjugated, and that they are being assimilated. That has to stop. That has to stop, because that is the root cause of the Anglophone problem, which in 2017, 2018 metamorphosed into the Anglophone crisis. So that problem has to be dealt with, and the way to deal with that problem is to return to the federal system of government, because only the federal system of government would guarantee Anglophone, or will leave Anglophones the autonomy that they need to govern their public affairs in accordance with their own inherited system of conduct of public affairs, whether it be in the area of justice, education, policing. The conduct of our police and all of that was not the way that the police are conducting themselves today. So that in all those areas, for us to cease to be assimilated, any honest and right-minded, objective Cameroonian will agree, Anglophone and Francophone, that for that we need to return to the federal system of government.
Yeah, Doctor.
Yeah.
When you say it's supposed to be negotiated under what platform? What clear steps do you expect to engage to getting this negotiation done, and then we effectively live in a federal structure? Isn't it more probable that through a political party that takes power, and then now a federation is implemented in Cameroon?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything depends upon how much civil liberty there is in Cameroon. So when I say how much civil liberty there is in Cameroon, you know that in countries where citizens enjoy civil liberties, citizens are able to engineer change just by by meeting in their various groups, studying an issue, propounding a solution, and then engaging with a receptive government concerning the application of that solution. In functioning democracies in the world, that's how it works, and that's how civil society contributes to change. So if we had in Yaoundé a government, a regime that listened to the people and saw that, or recognized that, especially since our constitution says that sovereignty, the sovereignty of Cameroon lies with the people of Cameroon, the government should be more responsive to what we, the people, and don't forget how our constitution starts. Our constitution opens with the words, we, the people, and then the rest follows. So we, the people, are the holders of all authority within our country, and we can delegate that to President of the Republic and the National Assembly and all that. But at the core of it is we, the people. So if this government were one which took seriously the fact that sovereignty lies with the people, it would listen. It would listen, and therefore it will be open to negotiation. Now, if it is not willing to do that, if it will not do that, willingly, then there are mechanisms where, well-tested mechanisms, where the population, when they are determined, force a government to act. There are well-tested methods of public manifestation, public debate, public this and public that. I mean, the blacks in the United States of America were not emancipated, did not win the right to vote, did not end, the horrendous system of violation of civil rights in the United States by forming political parties. No, but they had to engage civil action, civil society action that forces government authorities at all levels, in the case of the US, at local level, at state level, at federal level, to take notice and sit up. And if we do that, no government can resist the people forever. So instead of us sitting there and moaning and saying, but people ask me, but do you think that the regime will allow federation? I say, it is not for the regime to allow federation. The regime has no interest in allowing federation, because the unitary state is serving the oligarchs of the regime well. Why would you expect them to be the ones to take the initiative to change the thing?
Yeah,
so that's for the government. And now, as for political party, but again, tying in with what I said about the civil liberty space in Cameroon being very restricted, is that, I mean, Mr. Kum, if you and I create one more political party today, what we will be doing other than add to the 250 or so which are in the register of the registrar of political parties in the Ministry of Territorial Administration? We'll just have one more party. As long as, and the reason why we'll just have one more party is that there is no, the civil liberties space in Cameroon is restricted.
Yeah, but
if you and I form a party and say that this party, its main goal is to fight for a return to federation, and because of the government's attitude of restricting civil liberties, we are unable to hold a rally in any of our cities. We are unable to insist that federalists participate in the political life of the country. If every one of our gatherings, whether including meetings of executives in people's homes and all of that, stands a risk of being invaded by the police and the gendarmes, how would we function to gain federation through the operations of our political party? So that's why we again, it is us Cameroonians who have to push the regime in Yaoundé to agree that we enjoy the civil liberties that our constitution guarantees every one of us. It is in that space. If that space were to be created, then yeah, I will agree with you that the moment has come for us to create a political party whose main objective is to fight for a return to federation. And I can assure you, Mr. Kum, that if we, the Federalists, were to be given the space to go on radio, to go on television, but above all, to move from city to city, town to town, village to village in Cameroon, preaching the virtue of federalism, we would in no time persuade Cameroonians that federalism is the best way to go, because on the one hand, in the federal union will mean that we keep Cameroon one, but at the same time, the devolution of power and resources to autonomous regions would also mean that Cameroonians, wherever they are, have the capacity to decide more directly the development and so on of their respective regions. So federalism would be a win-win for everyone. And I'm persuaded that given the opening, given the chance, the freedom to take our message of federalism to the Cameroonian people, federalism would prevail.
Now, Doctor, you are talking about federalism, and you are hoping that government understands the need for a return to federalism to keep this nation intact and also preserve the autonomy, the resources and life of the people of the respective regions. I don't know what form of federalism you're talking about. Is it 2 states and or 3, 4, 5 states or 10 states as they operate today? But also, what are you telling the separatists themselves who think that federalists are sellouts or opportunists? Can you convince them that the path on which they are now is unworthy and is not winnable?
Yeah, Mr. Kum, I'll tackle the second question first.
Okay.
And yes, I mean, you know, separatists are not foolish people. They are not idiots. They are not mindless people. I can understand that given the frustrations that were generated by the lack of response of the regime in Yaoundé to our initiatives for the past, if you take it from, even just from 1990, with the convening of the first AAC in 1993, if you take it to this day, 2023, we are talking about 30 years, right? So 30 years of lack of response by the Yaoundé regime to the legitimate grievances of anglophones. Yeah, I can understand how that could have pushed some people to the extreme of saying it has to be independence or nothing, and to the further extreme of saying that if we have to get that independence by war, then we'll go to war. I understand that. But I'm saying that the fact that it is understandable doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right. It's not the optimal solution. And so, as you and I speak today, I observe that some people who, when this crisis started about 6 years ago or so, bought the illusion of independence because it was drummed into their head. Oh, we're going to get our independence. We're going to get our independence. The United Nations is coming to restore our independence. So they were counting on diplomacy when Ayuk Tabe and others were crisscrossing the world, saying that they were on a so-called diplomatic offensive. But when they realized that the international community will not condone the independence thing because the international community is not interested in Cameroon breaking up, when they realized that, they now turned to independence by war, using as a pretext the so-called allegation that President Biya declared war when he came back from a trip in Côte d'Ivoire, blah, 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 blah. But making it look as if everything started, the preparation of war by independence people, the independentists, did not begin with President Biya, that statement. Decades before, and even at the very beginning of this crisis, they had already been preparing people in the bush in Dada or whatever in Nigeria or parts of Cameroon. So let's not pretend. But and so there was this idea that independence is really coming, and the Simon Munzu of this world, and that's why they call us black legs. We are the ones who are trying to frustrate the independence. We know that we're supposed to get their independence, but the Munzus of this world who are federalists, they are traitors, blah, 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 black legs and all the rest of it. But Mr. Kum, I can tell you that today, the wool has dropped from the eyes of Anglophones, mothers, fathers, youth, children, who see that that thing of independence is an illusion. And therefore, amongst people who were enthusiastic about independence, if you like, amongst people who are enthusiastic about separation, there is people are beginning to rethink. So I won't be surprised if, were we to push the message of federalism, continue to push it, there will be many honest Cameroonians who will say, "Not true, more forget a power for independence, so we will concentrate on federation." And that's where, again, I used to tell my separatist brothers and sisters that if you guys were strategic, you should not be combating federalists, because your independence thing will not work. You should be seeing federation as your plan B, your fallback position. If independence fails, if you don't get independence, what next? Your answer to what next ought to be, well, we will settle for federation. But if you settle for federation as your plan B, then don't fight federalists. Consider them as your partners. For now, you are pursuing two different tracks, but there will come a day when those two tracks will converge, and they will converge on the path of federalism. So don't keep bashing federalists, calling them names and all of that, threatening to kill them and all the rest of it. That's nonsense. Okay, so from separatists, I am convinced that more and more are beginning to come to their senses. But of course, there will always be the hardcore. The hardcore. The type who, from the comfort of their homes in Oslo and Maryland and so on, start telling you how we'll fight till the last man standing. We'll fight till the last man standing. Yeah, the last man standing in Oslo. You fight in Cameroon till the last man standing in Oslo. You fight in Cameroon till the last man standing in Maryland. Why don't you come to Cameroon and fight and stand? But so that type, those hardcore, Mr. Kum, you and I will never be able to convince them. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. In our society, we should have plurality of opinion. We should. There will always be a dominant tendency, but we should not expect unanimity in everything. No, there will be dominant tendencies that will carry the day, but they have to allow room for people on the sidelines and on the fringes to continue to do their thing. So for a long time, on the fringes, you continue to have separatists. Okay, so that's my take. And for the government, again, I continue to believe that although this government, when it resorts to the use of arms, when it resorts to the misuse of the justice system to arrest and recklessly imprison people, innocent people, for years and years awaiting trial simply on matters of opinion, of their political opinion, sometimes looks indomitable, indomitable, right? But, Mr. Kum, there are examples in the evolution of the political scene in Cameroon where this same regime, when it is pushed by the will of the people, makes concessions. It makes concessions. It's just that it usually makes concessions to a very limited degree, just to allow the steam out of the pot a little bit. And then when it sees that enough steam has been let out, it covers the pot again. That's what happened. The creation of the Musonge Commission, the creation of this, the creation of that, the creation of DDR and all of that, the convening of the major national dialogue. Those are just acts of opening the lid a little bit for a bit of steam to come out. And once you feel that enough steam has come out, you close the pot again. That's how this government operates. But having said that, there are instances that you and I can point to and say, this government, when faced with the determination of the people, can make concessions. Even the convening of the major national dialogue, even though the outcome is as wishy-washy as we now know it to have been, but the whole idea of convening the major national dialogue was a concession to the will of the people.
Doctor, we have
and just to end by way of illustration and limiting it to Anglophone Cameroon specifically, we always go back to this example. The creation of the University of Buea did not come just by the goodwill of the regime in Yaoundé. No, it came from repeated pressure from Anglophones that we needed our own university. The creation of the GCE board, over which people were beaten and water cannons thrown on them in Yaoundé and all of that around the country, it came again as a people's struggle. That's what led to the creation by the government of the GCE board. And in order not to appear weak or to have given it to Anglophones, it went on to create the Office de Baccalauréat, which Francophones did not ask for. But it doesn't matter. That's fine. That's fine. We fought for a GCE board, and they got an Office de Baccalauréat in the process also. That's fine. That's good. But the third example that I would cite is, you remember, also you may not even be too young to remember, but they attempted back in the mid-80s to force us Anglophones to a two-shift working system. You know, Francophones used to go to work in the morning at 7:30. They close at noon. They take a break, go home, have lunch, drink wine,
Doctor, please, we have one last minute. What form of federation is the coalition? The coalition you are actually chairing today. What form of federation do you intend to see implemented in Cameroon?
Well, a very quick correction. I am not chair of the steering committee of the coalition anymore. I left room for younger people to handle that. So I am in the coalition, but not the chair of the steering committee anymore. But to your direct question, the coalition has not adopted a position on that yet, because we say, and we say repeatedly, that it is not for the coalition to determine or decide such a fundamental question. Okay? Everybody knows the virtues of federation. Now, whether that federation should be of 2 states, of 10 states, or 4 states, what we know is that what goes into the package of authority and resources to be devolved to the federated units is what is most important. Now, this debate as to whether it should be a 10-state federation, a 2-state federation, a 4-state federation, it's on. The debate is on, and there are people arguing in favor of one option or the other, which is quite healthy. So we should allow that debate to continue. But there will come a point, because we are not going to have a federal Cameroon of simultaneously, a federal Cameroon of 10 states, or 4 states, or 2 states, all of them together. No. So what that means is that in the process of democratic dialogue, discussion, negotiation, clarification, and so on, we're going to come to a point where we say, okay, of all these options, let's see which one commands the consensus. And the Cameroonian people will make that choice. It's not for the coalition that I'm a part of to make it and shove it under the throat of Cameroonian people. No, it doesn't work like that.
Dr. Munzu, you have been a fervent advocate for the autonomy of the regions, English-speaking regions in Cameroon. You want greater power for these two regions. Are you also conscious of the situation, the stakes between the Northwest and Southwest regions? Are you envisaging how to factor that in if if a scenario were to present itself where these two were to form a federation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fully aware of the so-called Northwest-Southwest dichotomy, which some people, both Northwesterners on the one hand, Southwesterners on the other hand, you have people who try to exploit that to create a sense of division within the Anglophone, amongst the Anglophone people, which I think to be a rather artificial thing. Nevertheless, again, as I said earlier, at some point in this conversation, you do not solve a problem which exists by denying its existence. There is no doubt that there is a certain malaise that is felt amongst Southwesterners. I don't know how many there are in terms of proportion, but felt in terms of the risk of domination of the Southwest by the Northwest in a two-state federation in which Northwest and Southwest form one state, as was the case from 1st October 1961 to I think 2nd of July 1972. And there are historical, there's an accumulation of historical facts that feed into that fear. So it's a reality. We shouldn't deny it. Okay, so we need to address that. But the other thing that we need to address is that we shouldn't have a federation in which, for example, they put part of Western region together with part of the Northwest, part of littoral together with part of Southwest, and say those form federated states, because you will just be, you will not be dealing with the Anglophone problem, you will simply be multiplying the Anglophone problem, because the Anglophone problem will remain an Anglophone problem in that Northwest and West federated state. It will remain. In that littoral and Southwest federated state, if we were to come to that, it will remain, because you have, again, Anglophone, Francophone in that federated state. So you see, it's a complex paradigm, and that's why it is necessary that we dispassionately examine the issues, but then through that proper examination, we find a solution to address each one of them, and it can be done as long as we have the will to dialogue and to negotiate. And finally, on this point, we Anglophones must not continue to speak as if we are the only ones who have concerns when it comes to governance in Cameroon. For example, when people talk of a two-state federation in terms of an Anglophone state and a Francophone state, for you, for me, for us Anglophones, that's easy. We'll have a state as it was before. And what is the distance between Victoria and Cambe? Hardly anything. We can continue in one state if it came to that. Although there are other considerations, as I said earlier, that will need to be taken into account and which may pretty well determine a different solution. But consider you recreate the Francophone federated state, which means that you are once again forcing the people of Kuseri to have to travel to Yaoundé to do certain things, and they may not like that. They have come to enjoy the fact that in Kuseri, at least within the framework of the far north region, there is proximity to their regional headquarters where things get done. If you abolish that and once again concentrate Francophone power. Let me call it that way. Concentrate Francophone power once again in Yaoundé in the context of a Francophone state. Do you see what the implications of that are for Cameroonians so far removed, geographically, ethnically, culturally, and otherwise, from Yaoundé? So these are the issues, and we Federalists are reflecting about this all the time. We know that when the moment comes, we'll have to resolve them.
One last question, Doctor. You said that there is a malaise amongst the people of the Southwest, and you say they are real, though you said it was you were not too sure about its existence, but later said it was real based on historical facts. What are some of these facts?
Oh, I mean, if you want some of these facts, and especially historical, very quickly for the time that we have left, and we can complete this subsequently. But you have, for example, people will tell you that the French government that ran Southern Cameroons in its concluding 2 years, and West Cameroon in its 11-year existence from 1961 to 1972, that government was tribalistic, that they tended to favor those whom we call today, they weren't called then, Northwesterners, whether it was in terms of the award of government contracts, whether it was in terms of recruitment, whether it was in terms of appointment to senior management positions. There are stories of the likes of the late Mr. Kwan, who were victimized in the civil. So there's a plethora of stories, of anecdotes, of experiences that are recounted. That's number one. Number two is that, you know, there is a phenomenon where we cannot escape from, whether we like it or not. In any case, it is my sociological observation that the Northwesterners, and I grant them that, you know, as someone who has so many friends, close friends, Northwesterners, that they are much more dynamic, much more productive. You know, they engage and they enjoy the fruit of their labor, of their engagement, of their dynamism, and so on. And that creates elements of jealousy, envy. You know, someone in Nguti, my village, will see a piece of land there, not cultivated, and will not cultivate it. It is standing there. We say that it is part of our forest. But then you find 3 or 4 guys, quote unquote, Northwesterners, arrive in Nguti. They go there, they cultivate the same forest, they plant things, plant cocoa, plant this, and all of a sudden they become cocoa farmers and coffee farmers in Nguti. You know, so the Nguti man, you just saw that forest standing there and you did nothing with it. Now your brother from the Northwest comes and is opens it up, turned it into a farm, and you are envious. You know, so there are these things, you know, Mr. Kum, and as I said, they are sociological, but then they should not be denied, they should not be refused, they should be acknowledged, but explained. Why should you, for example, be try to why should you imply that that Northwesterner who comes and cultivates that forest in Nguti is depriving the Nguti man of something? Of what? Of what? You know, you should be able to explain. You know, so those are the realities of our society. They express the vibrancy of our society, the lifeblood of our society, and we should not approach them by denial. We should not approach them by denial. So, in a new Cameroon, and we all have to start thinking now about a new Cameroon, because there's an opportunity coming for the Cameroon we want, our own Cameroon, emerging from the ashes of the colonial Cameroon that we've had now for since independence, because the Hijo regime and the Biya regime, objectively speaking, are simply a projection in time of the colonial way of governing Cameroonians, whose sovereignty is not even recognized, and who are seen as just cannon fodder for the ruling oligarchs who have become the new colonialists, the new colonizers. Now, so that has to change, and I believe fervently that there is an opportunity is coming for that to change in the years to come. So you and I, you even more than me, I mean, you are a young man, I'm an old man, you know. So what we're talking about is your Cameroon. But the new Cameroon we should be thinking about, our Cameroon, is one which shifts away from the colonial model that has governed us under President Hijo and President Biya to the new model that whoever succeeds President Biya will have to implement. And it doesn't matter who that person is, whether it is his son or his wife or his daughter or his in-law or whoever, we should only say that regardless of who you are, taking over, you have to recognize that the Cameroon that you are going to run is not going to be the same Cameroon that was bequeathed by President Hijo and President Biya. It's going to be a Cameroon that we Cameroonians forge. And if you want to be our president, you know that you are going to govern us within the parameters of this new Cameroon. That's what you and I, as citizens of Cameroon, should be saying today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simon Munzu, for accepting to talk to our audience today on Prime Hour. We are so grateful and appreciative. Just to note that Dr. Simon Munzu, our guest on today's edition of the program, was the United Nations Secretary General's Deputy Special Representative for Ivory Coast from October 2014 to August 2016. He also previously served the United Nations in various capacities. We want to say we are grateful, Doctor, and hoping to have you again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kum. Anytime. We are here to enlighten public opinion, but also to help to chart the way forward out of a crisis in our country, which we did not ask for, but which we all have to work to end, and hopefully it will end soon. Thank you, and good evening or good night to your viewers, especially those in Cameroon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We also want to thank you all who took time off to watch this edition of the program. To the production team, we say we are immensely grateful. Thank you all for watching. Stay blessed. Bye-bye.